Welcome everybody to the seasonal diet, eating what our ancestors ate when they ate it like we were evolved to do. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone! We're not going too much into the history of this holiday because it's not something we like to celebrate here, knowing the actual origin of it. And in reality, it was probably not originally a Christian holiday anyway. It would have been something our ancestors celebrated right on the equinox. And when Christianity came in, they just changed the name and different date, like they did with so many other holidays. So we're not here to talk about that, but regardless, whether you are Christian or atheist or pagan, it's a fun time to get drunk and have some nice food. Today we are speaking about corned beef and cabbage. How is it in relation to the seasonal diet, and how would we make this in a more historically accurate way according to how our ancestors would have eaten it? So first of all, this is known most commonly to be an Irish recipe, but it really is a recipe from all over the north of Europe. In Scandinavia, especially Sweden, it's a bit more popular with the skolmakargårda and the kjellknöl, the various beef stews and different things like that you'll find in Scandinavia and all over the north and east of Europe, traditional at this time of year involving some kind of beef. There's just one problem. If you watch the seasonal diet, you know by now that beef is actually a traditional fall and early winter food. Why? It's because cattle is the livestock that is the most high maintenance, and it takes the most food and work to feed throughout the winter. So humans living in rural societies, especially in the cold north of Europe, they would have slaughtered as many of their cattle as possible in the fall. And, it doesn't make much sense to be slaughtering the cattle right now with the spring just around the corner, because you're about to be able to turn them out of the barns to graze. So that's why the vast majority of beef recipes are in traditional fall recipes. By the midwinter, there was still popular beef, but after the midwinter, humans would have switched mainly to pork in the diet, at least as far as the livestock meats go. So, what the hell? Why are we eating beef in March? And why the hell are we eating cabbage in March? Cabbage too, those were harvested in the fall and they would have been rotten by now. They would not have lasted the winter. Well, this is something we today don't really know about or understand, but originally, before the time of refrigerators and freezers, corned beef was made with preserved beef, not fresh beef like we make it out of today. It was usually, in history, made with smoked, dried, or salted beef. This is where the name corned beef comes from, actually, because when they slaughtered the cattle in the fall and they put the salt on it to preserve it, the salt flakes they used were as big as corn kernels, so that's why they call it corned beef. So what was used for the first St. Patrick's Day recipe was actually more like a salted beef that was left over from being preserved from the fall slaughter. It was whatever beef you had left from the winter, and then they throw it all in a pot with some water, put in some spices maybe, add some cabbage, not fresh cabbage, but preserved, pickled cabbage, because that's the only thing that would have been left and able to last the winter. And then they put it all in a pot, cooked it, made a massive feast out of it, probably not just one day, but probably many days, and they ate the last bit of beef that they actually had preserved from the winter. This was all done over the north of Europe and even the east of Europe. We have many records and recipes of these types of things. The reason it became known as an Irish thing is because of something called the Cattle Acts of the year 1666. The British imposed high taxes and restrictions on importing cattle from Ireland, so the British at that time had a big reduction in cattle, and the Irish was left over with a ton of it. And of course, Ireland is the best place to have cattle too. It's a mild temperature and lots of wide open spaces and flat greenlands. And over the next few hundred years, this is when we see the origins and the names and the recipes of the first corned beef and cabbages. But like I mentioned, long before this, we ate this type of thing all over the north of Europe. It's something that is in most of our ancestral diets, if that's where your heritage comes from. So to be eating like our ancestors for this season, it would be a bunch of beef now, right in the late winter to the early spring, and it would be pretty much the last beef we would be eating until the fall slaughter again. So enjoy now, eat up tons of beef. Me too, I do have little bits of beef at different times throughout the year, but really the very most of it in the fall, and finishing up with it right now in the late winter and early spring. And again, if we want to be historically accurate, it would be more of the dried and preserved beef. How about you guys? Any recipes of corned beef that you like? Any traditions or recipes where you are from? Let us all know.